Good morning, everybody. This is Harry Rulin. Thanks for joining us today for the continuing webinar series. Today we're doing drones as a deadly weapon, and I am pleased we have Chuck Adams, the CEO of One Up Aerial Drone Services, with us today. Also in my conference room is Santiago Garcia, and they are both expert council members for us. And I think from Chuck's perspective, Chuck does a lot of work in the drone area. Santiago does a lot of work in the executive protection area. And drones, as you can imagine, are becoming a big issue in that world as well. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go on. One of the things I want to remind all of you is that after the presentation, this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted to the Beasley portal, so people can have access to it after the fact. Another thing I want to remind you of is if you have questions that come up during the presentation, there is a question function in GoToWebinar, so please don't hesitate to ask us those questions. I know several of you already have sent questions in before we even started, and we will definitely get to those during the presentation. Some of those questions that were asked are actually covered in the presentation. Some of them we'll actually answer after the fact. So why don't we get started? If we can get the slides to turn, that is. Let's see. Maybe not. There we go. Okay. So we have an agenda up on the screen. We don't need to stick to it aggressively, but I'm going to have Chuck give you a little bit of an understanding of the industry. You know, those of us who are lay people don't necessarily understand where drones are today, where they came from, and understand the capabilities that they have. I think once you see the capabilities that they have, you're going to understand that they represent a very significant opportunity to the insurance industry and a threat to all of your insureds and just the population as a whole. So, Chuck, why don't I hand it over to you and you can talk a little bit about these things.
Perfect. Thanks, Harry. Thank you, everyone, for being on the line with us today, and look forward to working with you down the road. What I wanted to do is the first 15 slides, 17 slides, kind of breeze through really quickly. It's an overview of the industry, how drones are currently being used for good, how they're being used for bad, and then get into a little bit about what to do about it in defense of your airspace and so forth. So bear with me. The first few slides are going to feel like speed dating, but beyond that, we'll get into some meat of the presentation.
Are you an expert on speed dating?
No, I'm not.
We may do a future webinar on that because that probably is a deadly weapon as well.
Don't go there, Harry. Don't go there. So if you look at the industry today, this is not a One Up Aerial Drone Services forecast. This is from Goldman Sachs and PwC. Depending on who you listen to, and why I jumped into the business, my background, I came from a high-tech world for 30 years, jumped into the business early 2016, and this is the reason why. It's a $100 billion business coming at us. If you look at PwC and some of their reports, it's a $125 billion business. I'll break that down a little bit further on the next. Harry, how am I moving this forward here, buddy?
That's a good question.
Next.
Why are you asking me? Am I the technology expert?
There we go. If you break that down a little bit further, the military, and I'll show some of the drones as weapons that the military uses, about a $70 billion marketplace. The consumer drones, if anyone has seen the Drone Racing League, have your kids have bought something at Best Buy or Walmart, those fit into that $17 billion consumer marketplace. And even the Drone Racing League and racing drones are fitting into commercial applications. The Daytona 500, just on Monday, they used a racing drone to do some of the footage of the Daytona 500. Where we spend a lot of time is in that $13 billion marketplace, commercial and civil, both doing drone services as well as selling drones. That's the fastest growing piece to the market. If you break that down a little bit further, Get the screen a chance to render here. There we go. If you break that down a little bit further by vertical or marketplace, the three top industries that we are doing business with and we see out there are the construction, agriculture, and insurance claims. And I'll show some actual examples here in a sec of insurance claims. You might want to note that when we talk about insurance claims, it really can be for proactive during events and then reactive for claims and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit further about that in a couple of slides down the road. In every headline newscast, we've trained about 5 different news operations across the country now. They're deploying drones. No surprise, they're coming about as an industry. It's really in its early infancy. It's in the making. It's in transition. And there's a lot of regulations that are being deployed as well through the FAA that we work closely with and stay close in terms of things like remote ID and other things that over the next 3 years you'll see the FAA get more involved than they already have been in deploying certain regulations, as well as state and local governments, municipalities, and so forth. But suffice to say, the opportunity is endless. No matter where you look, the headlines, there's something going on. You see a couple of them that I've captured in the screenshots there.
Chuck, let me interrupt you there for 1 second, because those of you who have participated in our webinars before know that the news services can be both a positive and a negative in deadly weapon situations. So one of the problems that we have with social media with newscasters is that when schools are in lockdown or we have other situations, they're actually communicating with the students or others during those situations. Obviously, what a drone creates is an opportunity for them to further meddle and get involved. So, you know, when we're thinking about drones as a deadly weapon, it's not just the drone being used as a deadly weapon, but how does the drone potentially interfere with our ability to properly manage a situation? You know, so now, you know, a news service can actually fly a drone into a situation without risking an individual. So that is another thing that we're monitoring and paying some attention to, because again, drones being used for good, you're going to see more of that, and Chuck's going to talk more about that. But think about it when you're analyzing the exposures that your insureds have. You know, for example, he just mentioned the Daytona 500. You know, that's great that they were able to use a racing drone to help them get great footage so that the people who are watching could see. But similarly, those of you who insure festivals, rodeos, ball games, concerts, mass gathering locations, you know, think about the fact that a drone can easily be flown into any one of those situations. So sorry to interrupt, Chuck.
No, that's great. And part of our training, that's a good point, part of our training both for first responders as well as for insurance, for news agencies, says that very thing, is like, you can be a help or you can be a hindrance. Stay out of the way, let them do their jobs, and continue on. There are some laws here in Colorado, and specifically on drones interfering with first responders that it's quite interesting.
Well, we had that problem when we were at Virginia Tech, you know, after the shootings there. One of the things we saw was that the news reporters wanting to get, you know, the next big break in the story, but they were actually breaking into private areas. They were breaking into, like you remember the professor who put his back up against the door to prevent the shooter from coming in so the kids could jump out the window. He was killed when he was shot through the door, and we had a situation where the reporters broke into his office. So if they're willing to do that kind of thing, what are they willing to use a drone for? So, you know, we just have to be aware of those kind of things. So anyway,
keep them in check. A little bit on, so drones are not necessarily new. The technology and the advances that have been made have been significant in the last 10 years. But if you look at, and it's hard to see on the screen there, if you download or get copies of the presentation, there's a thorough list of the history of drones. But some major milestones on the left-hand side there. They've been around since the late 1700s using unmanned balloons. In 1900, Tesla used a wireless controller to control an airship. Those of you that are old enough like me might remember the man from U.N.C.L.E. He had weaponized RC aircraft that was part of the man from U.N.C.L.E. And then around 2013, the DJI folks from China started to get involved. Phantom 1 came about, and it's now up to a version called the Phantom 4. It's a daily workhorse for us, and it is quite good, and the technology has come a long ways just in the last 7 years.
If someone wanted to buy a Phantom today, how much would that cost them?
Yeah, $1,500 to $2,000, depending on the amount of batteries they want.
And how much of a payload can that lift?
Oh gosh, small. I mean, on that particular drone, it's not a whole lot. They are using them in, the size of a grenade. It could carry a grenade.
Well, okay, great, thanks.
In the Middle East, we've seen them in combat. So over there,
actually using consumer drones.
Correct.
In combat. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. In 2019, just a year ago, and you're going to see more and more of this, passenger drones coming about from Bell, Boeing. There's actual tests being done with Ewang in Dubai and Nevada right now on carrying passengers around. So you think about the technology, the advancements that are coming at us, it's quite remarkable. So a little bit about us, just a brief commercial.
You're welcome.
Sorry, this is like the ad in the middle of the presentation, right? So we sell drones. We provide drone services, and we sell drones anywhere from a $399 Mavic Mini all the way up to $27,000 to $30,000 Intel Falcon 8. I'll talk about a GPS-less drone called Digital Aeroless. It's about $27,000, and every make and model in between there. Unique, DJI, Intel, Digital Aeroless, many different models. So if you are looking for a drone, Christmas is coming, birthdays, please give us a shout. We provide drone services, and I'll talk to some of the projects we've done here recently. We also provide training, development, and consultation. Happy to do that to get people started and off on the right foot. And then finally, a product or a solution that we announced late last year is to protect your airspace. And it's the airspace around your business, property, personnel, so forth. And I'll get into, that's the meat, and get into the depth of it here in just a little bit.
So everybody, one of the reasons I wanted Chuck to do a little bit of a commercial, he's going to be with us at RIMS. So those of you who are going to come to the RIMS event that happens to be in Colorado, where we are right now, it's going to be in Denver in May. Chuck's going to bring some of his drones. I want you guys to see the drones. Now, some of you may want to talk to him as well as about some of the other businesses that you're doing. So, for example, the building that we're sitting in right now just had a new roof put on because of a big hailstorm that we had. Chuck's going to show you some photos and some other work that he's done there. But I think it's going to be interesting. Our plan is to have a drone in the booth at RIMS and actually show the ability to do things negatively. In other words, the whole concept of drones as a deadly weapon, so that people can see it and touch it and understand it. We're also going to be doing an event, a deadly weapons event, after the RIMS conference one evening. We're going to take those of you who'd like out to a shooting range, and we're going to allow you to experience some deadly weapons usage, but also the plan is to have a drone there, and you'll actually be able to see it fly. So anyway, that's the reason that we wanted Chuck to give you a little bit of an understanding of what his company does and who they are.
Perfect. Thanks, Harry. You're great straight man. Because this is our a little bit of the drones for good. And as with any technology, I like to point out, not unlike cell phones, not unlike the internet, not unlike any technology that's out there, drones can be used for good, and drones can be used by nefarious people, combat situations, etc. The drones for good, these next couple of slides, this is some work that we've done for Allstate. And most importantly is the quote from Justin Herndon down in the bottom right-hand corner. If you look at what they were doing with their adjusters, they were doing 2 to 3 locations a day. Basically, drive to a location, climb up on a ladder, build a scaffolding, whatever they had to do, and then take a few pictures, risk their themselves on top of the roof, as well as concrete tiles, different things that might break while they're walking on the roof. With drones, they're now able to become desk adjusters and get 8 to 9, possibly more, done per day, basically deploying folks like us out as a service, going off and snapping the pictures, bringing them back, uploading them to the cloud that they want it into, and they go and do the analysis. If you look at another project that we recently completed, this was most of last year, down in southern Utah. There's a couple of projects on this slide. First is in the upper right-hand corner, working with an engineering firm out of Colorado, looking for undetonated munitions. Back in the 50s, the Army Corps was shooting target practice at the side of a fish in a sandstone cliff. We now have a development called Winchester Hills that's encroaching on that sandstone cliff. There is 105 and 37 millimeter shells, artillery that was still left on the property from those examples. They hired us to go down and take a cursory look and map out the entire property. It's about 140 acres in March of last year, and then November of last year we came back in after a close study of all of the 140 acres, came back in and identified 12 specific sites that they wanted to look at more closely, pulled the drone in with a high-powered zoom lens and got right on top of the areas without rappelling, without any kind of climbing and risk to individuals. The upper left-hand corner, you can see there, those are actual munitions that they've identified, and they had to mark every one of them. And they use base stations and so forth down in the bottom left-hand corner. The middle picture is another kind of engineering type project. It was a traffic flow analysis, and this was for HDR engineering here in Colorado. It's for a school in Highway 105. It's right outside Monument Academy. As you look at that, I'm not going to play the video, but there's a video behind this. You can see the cars lined up on the left-hand side. They've had a number of accidents. They've got to re-engineer the traffic pattern. We took the drone up, flew for an hour in the morning, flew for an hour in the afternoon, and then built a hyperlapse for them so they didn't have to look at 2 hours worth of videos, essentially seeing the traffic patterns firsthand from the school itself. So kind of drones for good. And
well, but let's talk about drones for good on this slide for a second. One of the things that those of you who've heard our presentations before that you've probably heard me talk about is that individuals who perpetrate crimes, especially deadly weapons crimes, don't just wake up in the morning and say, oh, I think I'm going to bring a gun to work today, or I think I'm going to bring a gun to school today. They typically plan them, and they plan them very well. So in the same way that Chuck and his team did a traffic flow analysis for Monument Academy, if I'm planning for what my escape routes are, I want to look at windows, I want to see how traffic flows at a certain time of the day, I now have a capability to do that I never had before. And so, again, there's always the flip side of the positive coin as to what we need to be thinking about. So, you know, in the same way that we've been advising businesses for many years now that they need to be monitoring their social media, there's a great reason as well that firms are going to start, they need to be monitoring their exposure to who's monitoring them, to monitoring drones, understanding their airspace, because it represents a risk. And I think what you're going to see as we go on in this presentation is it's not just a risk of somebody watching what you're doing, it's that they can actually take certain actions against you. Similarly, you know, when you think about some of your larger insureds, especially those that have campuses where things are taking place on those campuses that for one reason or another, they don't want the public to be aware of. So some of our automobile manufacturing clients or people like that, drones now represent a real risk to the security of their intellectual property. So again, all things that we need to think about and talk about as we go on.
Great points, Harry. It's interesting how you must have grown up blowing up things.
more than once, but let's not go there.
So a little bit more on drones for good. This was an actual construction progress report that we did, shot monthly for 19 months. Excuse me. Bottom right-hand corner was the dirt on the ground, and the finished project was, so that was June of 2018 when they first started, and by the end there, left-hand side, you'll see December 2019. Upper right-hand corner, some other work we've done for CDOT, looking at asset management, looking at did the dirt show up, is my workers doing the right things, and kind of the just analysis of the property itself and the construction progress.
Well, it's interesting you say, did my dirt show up? Another great thing from a standpoint of deadly weapons violence prevention, it gives you, drones can give you an overview of your facility. So let's say, one of the things we get regularly are festivals or other kinds of events that only happen for a short period of time. They might be a day, they might be a week. Some of our larger rodeos are 3 weeks. We have one rodeo that's 3 weeks, 2 million visitors. Looking at it before so that we can see what does the ground look like, what are the methods of ingress and egress. One of the things that Chuck will talk about a little further on in this presentation is a drone that can actually fly through culverts and sewer pipes. Think about how does that impact the location where we're holding a festival or we're holding a major concert, especially when you take into account what took place in Vegas a couple of years ago with the shooting there. So I want you guys to think about those kind of things as Chuck is going through the presentation.
Perfect. You're right, Harry. And I didn't cover it, but in the upper right-hand corner, it's a little mysterious what that picture is, but that's an actual stockpile for a brick manufacturer down in Pueblo, Colorado, that you can measure and view different types of material, about 42 different stockpiles. You think about how artificial intelligence is coming at us, and you look at China today and some of the facial recognition and other things. I truly believe that in the years ahead, drones are going to play very closely into some of that technology as well. It's, in the upper right-hand corner there it's already starting. So, flip on.
Great.
Last couple of slides for drones for good. I mentioned we do training and development and consultation. This was for our local fire department, one of the largest fire departments here in Colorado, the South Metro Fire and Rescue. And I wanted to give a couple examples of what they've done. They've done 2 3-day training courses that we took them through. They've purchased around $50,000 in drones for 3 different divisions, Metcom, Safety, and Hazmat. But to give you an actual example of how they're using it, they recently purchased 6 what are called Mavic Minis. They're basically disposable drones to a wealthy fire department, our tax dollars at work. They're $399, but the idea behind it is to send those 6 drones in to a hazardous material situation prior to sending in firefighters. So great use case, great way to save lives, but think about how that might be used for nefarious people as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you think about that from the standpoint of someone, one of the biggest problems we have is workplace violence. If I want to get even with my manager, my boss, whomever, I may now have a technology by which I can do that where I don't even have to walk into the building. So definitely the kind of things that need to be thought about.
Corporate espionage, for sure.
Well, corporate espionage is a whole other thing that we definitely want to talk to people about in the future, because if I can land a teeny little drone, I mean, some of these drones now are getting to the point of being almost not seeable. I can land it in a boardroom and listen to everything that goes on in that boardroom after that. So we can talk more about that on another webinar.
Yeah. So this is, Harry mentioned this GPS-less drone in earlier conversation. It's a new drone that we've picked up the end of last year. It basically uses artificial intelligence to calculate 32 different dimensions of where it is in space in any given time. So it can go into culverts, it can go into crack houses, it can go into tight spaces, it can go into mines, into caves, into places that you just can't get to. Now the flight time is relatively short, but basically the idea behind the drone is it kind of creeps along, it can take a look around, it can look up, the camera looks up, it has an illuminator on the front of it as well, so you can see in places that you just can't get to. There's some great videos out there. I won't take you through them today, but if you're interested, give us a call or take a look online at some of the YouTube videos that they have. It's an amazing drone. Basically, you see the leather straps on the side of it to stop the drone. It's unlike any other that's out there. You basically grab it, hold it down 90 degrees, and it shuts off. It knows enough to shut off. So pretty interesting when you consider GPS-less. Now, how the FAA deals with things like this, it's going to get real interesting over the next 3 or 4 years, because there is a great use case for it, but some of the control of being able to see, where the drones are and the privacy that goes with that and other things, it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Well, and for those of you who don't know specifically what Chuck is referring to, there's been a lot of problems around the world with drones interfering with airport traffic, things of that nature. So the FAA and others have been putting in place new rules where the drone itself is going to have to be identifiable. And obviously the bad guys are never going to comply with those rules. So while it's great that the FAA is doing that kind of stuff, it's going to keep the honest people honest. It's not going to help with some of the things that we're thinking about when we talk about drones as a deadly weapon. So
absolutely.
Speaking of a deadly weapon.
Yeah, another great segue. This is what I wanted to put this up there to give you a perspective on $1 million drones as opposed to $27,000 to $35,000 and $399 drones. This was what took out Qassem Soleimani and his other buddy. 4,900-pound MQ-9 Reaper drone that carried 4 Hellfire missiles. Its range is 1,150 miles. Now you think about that. All of the drones we've talked about for good so far need to remain in visual line of sight of the drone operator to follow FAA rules. They're flying these drones from very remote locations to be able to carry out some of the missions. Its altitude, way higher. We're limited to about 400 feet AGL or above ground level. This goes up to 50,000 feet. It's designed to gather intelligence, execute on targets, and as you can see there, he was taken out. He was head of the Quds force in Baghdad. There was another gentleman, I can't pronounce his name, Abu Muhandis, who was also killed, and I'll show how this was carried out on the next slide. But basically, the drone and the missiles melted everything. There was only his ring left and a couple of scrap pieces of metal that were able to identify him.
I think it's also important to understand that these drones, when we talk about drone, it's really referring to a remotely operated vehicle. So while the one we just looked at is a military drone and very expensive, very sophisticated, people can build these things, and I would encourage you, you're going to see some slides coming up where I will give you specific information about where you can go to look at them on YouTube. But I would encourage all of you to spend a few minutes looking on YouTube at some of the things that people have made. I mean, literally, these are drones that were created by kids, by individuals, and the things that they do with them. And, then you realize that, well, for example, these drones, the military ones, Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada is flying drones that are over the Middle East. So again, because as our technology increases, and this is one of the things, when we do the vulnerability and threat analysis for your insured, one of the things we talk to them about is that every year we want them to update their vulnerability analysis based on changes in technology. Well, that really applies to drones. You know, it's an overwhelming thing because drones are changing every day. And unfortunately, you know, we've seen, for example, vehicles used as weapons. We're talking about flying drones right now, but you know, you can have a drone vehicle as well, the same way that a remote controlled car, you know, the little ones that kids play with, can be driven down the road. Now that cars are becoming electronically operated, you know, your gas pedal in your car is no longer connected via a cable. It's all done electronically. You know, your steering mechanisms in some of the newest cars are electronic. So the ability to now drive a car remotely truly exists. So what does that mean about driving through a crowd, driving a bomb-loaded car into a facility, you know, those kind of things. So we have to think about all those things when we're talking about drones as a deadly weapon, and we have to think about them in terms of the policy, because the Beasley policy is the only policy out there right now that is in fact covering drones as a deadly weapon. So anyway, Chuck, sorry to interrupt.
No, please, good stuff. You did blow things up when you were a child. I know you did.
Who says I ever stopped? No, sorry.
This is how the mission was carried out. It started at about 12:30 when he landed at the Baghdad airport. He was picked up by the Iraq-based PMF militia, left the airport to an access road nearby, and then he was hit shortly thereafter, probably around 12:45, 1 o'clock in the morning, by the four missiles, and took out two of the cars. You talk about the precision of that, and from 1,100, possibly 1,150 miles away, and think about the technology that we have that can carry that out is quite amazing. So carry on. One other one that's kind of drones for nefarious, that may be nefarious, may not be, was this mysterious drones. You may have seen it on national news. You may have seen it on some of the local news. That's me. If you, it's kind of an ugly shot, but the drone.
Oh no, pretty. You look good.
And there's a link in this to the newscast. But there's been starting in mid-December a number of drones that are flying in grid patterns, and they're not normal small drones. They're like 6 feet across drones. In this newscast, in the link that's in there, we had one of our operators go out to the area along with a couple of other first responders and check it out. I mean, we suggested fly the news helicopter out there, just look at what's going on, but it was consistent from mid-December all the way through till now. They're still flying out there. There's about 17 drones that are 6 feet across that are flying a grid pattern that nobody can really tell what it is. So the moral of the story, and I'll fast forward here, we did the interview. My concern was over the security and what really is going on, that nobody can figure out what is going on. The first responders that were out there in the group, there was about 8 of them, came back and kind of reported on things. And there was some weird stuff that happened. In Brush, Colorado, there was lights across a runway that every time the drone would fly over, they would go off. So that's kind of unique when you think about an active runway for lights to go off. That's sort of weird. They put together a group of first responders and other agencies. There was about 15 different agencies put together on a Monday following the Friday that this all happened in, I believe it was early January. On Tuesday, that group was disbanded and said, we've got it. We know what's going on. So it's Department of Defense, it's military, it's our government, it's somebody that is doing it. But the first responders and the agencies were all kind of left in the dark, and it carries on still to this day. There is plenty on social media if you want to go check that out. Harry mentioned this earlier. This guy, I don't know if it's a YouTube fame background or something, but he has attached machine guns and flamethrowers onto the bottom of drones. And he's got a famous YouTube video that's out there. You can see it in this presentation. This is just a snapshot of it. But there's also things like in the middle, towards the bottom of the screen, that there was a drone pilot that was charged just last year with flying pamphlets over San Francisco 49ers games and dropping politically charged pamphlets. Now you think about that. If he can drop pamphlets from a consumer-based drone, what else could be dropped on somebody in that stadium? And that's where we start to talk about how do you defend some of your airspace and what do you do with that?
Well, think about that. I mean, we had, probably 10 years ago, we had the anthrax problem where anthrax was being sent through the mail. How easy would it be to spread that type of an agent over a crowd in any kind of mass gathering location? Similarly, we've had several deadly weapons claims that involved acid attacks. So not common here in the United States, but common or more common in Britain, where Beasley is located. So how easy would it be, again, to drop something into a crowd, at the Super Bowl or something of that nature? One of the reasons I would encourage people to go to YouTube and watch this particular quadcopter video is this gentleman who has a YouTube channel. He does a lot of weapon stuff, but that particular quadcopter drone is equipped with a fully automatic machine gun, which he shoots some mannequins with. Then at the end, he flies it through the back window of a car and detonates it. So I think one of the things to understand there, again, from a deadly weapons perspective, this is someone who built something that can be used in a nefarious fashion. And again, when you talk about drones as a deadly weapon, if I'm trying to get at, a particular individual, I no longer need to figure out how to get into your building. I no longer need to get up to the 10th floor where my boss's office is. I just fly my drone up there. Now, Chuck, I believe that this one with the flamethrower on the bottom left-hand corner, again, talking about how things are used for good, they were using this, the utility companies were using this to remove vegetation from near power lines.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
But again, you can imagine that if I want to light my neighbor's house on fire, it can be used for nefarious purposes as well. So again, I think understanding the technology and why Beasley added drones as a deadly weapon to the policy, I think that's the point we're trying to make sure we get across to everybody.
Yeah, there you go. Lighting your neighbor's house on fire again.
Yep. No, I never did that.
So what do we do about it? This is a solution that, excuse me, we have launched the end of last year in partnership with Dedrone, but it's basically to protect your property. And I make a comment down there at the bottom. Technology is out there. The laws will take time to catch up with some of that technology. It's not going to happen immediately for our government and for our people to, protect us. So what do you do about it? This solution is designed to stop unwanted drones, protect your airspace security, and could be, we talked about cybersecurity, protect your innovations and assets. So I'm going to take you through kind of a quick, how does it work? What does it do? So this is an actual report of the number of alerts over a given property, and we can provide plenty of references if need be. It had 852 alerts that came over. Now, some of the companies that have deployed this are companies like Tesla. They had coming off their manufacturing line and Tesla's putting into their parking lots with hedge fund managers flying drones over the top of them to detect what is the production, is Tesla going to make their numbers for the quarter, things like that. So you think about some of the things that this can do, the alerts, the average alerts per day, the days with alerts over a 98-day period, the maximum alerts per day. You can see it's very powerful when you tie the sensors, and I'll talk to the sensors and how it works here in a sec, into security solutions that are in place, perhaps on Tesla's property or Gatwick or the University of Oklahoma, all three good customers of ours, and what you can do with that. So the solution is designed to be, it's designed to augment the security solutions that are in place and protect, perhaps your cybersecurity, enhance some of the other things that go with the security solutions in place. Maybe PTZ cameras, security guards, so on and so forth.
So Chuck, a lot of our insureds are municipalities. They're cities, they're other kinds, the water districts, things of that nature. And some of them, of course, have prisons, they have jails, they have other secure facilities where drones represent a real risk. But if I have a prison where prisoners are allowed out in the yard, I can now fly weapons, contraband, all kinds of things, and drop them into the yard pretty much without being known or seen unless something like this is in place. Is this the kind of system that could help prevent those deadly weapons kind of incidents?
Absolutely. Prisons are some of our best customers, and you can see some of the links to testimonials on our website that are out there. But absolutely, protect from even cigarettes and cell phones and so forth. So
that's what I was thinking.
Prisons, stadiums, power plants, really any place that wants to protect the airspace and at least identify what is going on in your airspace relative to drones.
Well, open water supplies. We have a lot of water districts. I mean, if somebody wanted to somehow contaminate a water district, easier to do with a drone than walking in manual.
There are a few limitations in terms of, if you're going to protect all of Los Angeles,
of course,
we might want to do it in a different way, but there are, the idea behind it is to protect subsections of Los Angeles or stadiums and smaller venues and so forth. I mentioned earlier that, you've got, everybody on this call probably has some type of traditional security in place. Right now, that security is great for kind of the baseline cybersecurity, looking at premises and so forth, but the airspace above is completely unprotected, and that's what we want to help with. It's blind to, threats like smuggling, spying, terror. So that's where we're focused on.
Okay.
Come on, there we go. So, as we talked earlier, drones are inexpensive. They can carry some heavy payloads if you've got a big enough one, and we will show it at RIMS, a couple of payload drop mechanisms. They can be flown by just about anyone. You can buy them at Best Buy, and anybody can get started. Now, if you want to do it commercially, you've got to have some certifications and so forth, but hobbyists, go for it. There's a large number of manufacturers. Now, most of them are Chinese, and probably 80% of the market is owned by DJI today, but there are a number of others that are entering the market, particularly from the U.S. and other areas, France and the U.S. in particular.
What we saw at the Olympics and things like that, that was Intel, right? They're big. Isn't Intel big in the drone world?
Intel is one, yes. The Intel, the light show you're talking about.
Yes,
correct. They're doing light shows instead of fireworks, kind of a sustainable environmental approach to things, but
using small drones.
Exactly. Programs to, you think about that when we talked about drone swarms.
Yep.
That's something else that you should be thinking about down the road. This solution can protect from multiple drones, not just one drone, which there's a number of solutions that are out there. There's people in France that are using eagles to take them out of the sky. I think here in Colorado, the environmentalists may have a problem with that, but there's nets off of drones, but you're capturing one drone at a time as opposed to drone swarms. So keep that in mind. The payloads themselves can have video cameras, photo cameras, sensitive microphones, or what we've talked about already, anthrax, white powder, grenades, so forth.
Well, if you go to YouTube and just put in drone and handgun, you will see some interesting things that people have done that are very scary.
Yep. So just a quick note there. A typical drone, to give you some stats, it can fly up to 50 miles an hour. Its range can be 1 to 3 miles, although, as you saw earlier, military is going to be far greater than that. Payload can be anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds. They can even hold heavier if you're willing to spend the money. Most of the off-the-shelf drones are costing anywhere from, I'd put $399 down to about $3,500. So go ahead. It's an extensible, this solution that we have is an extensible platform for detection and mitigation. Basically, it uses software in the center there that's called Drone Tracker. It understands the drones and the drone signatures by using the data feed on the left-hand side there. We put up sensors around premises, and it can go up to about 5 miles away using RF analytics. That can be, as you see there, SDR, Wi-Fi, direction finding. It also uses video analytics, and it kind of works in conjunction with PTZ cameras and current security solutions in place. It has radar. It also has audio analytics. So the unique tone, if you've ever heard a drone, the unique tone of a drone will be, the sensor will find some of that. Now, people may ask, well, what happens if I go out and build my own drone? I'm a DIY kind of guy. I'm going to build my own drone. It may be a problem for some of those, but the off-the-shelf drones, majority of the drones, if we don't have it in our database already, we can get it in about 2 weeks worth of time. So we do that regularly and work closely with Dedrone to come up with that. And then from a defense standpoint, you can do a number of things. You can alert security. You can do something with your building management system. Maybe it's close the blinds. Maybe it's set off a smoke bomb. Maybe it's, think out of the box on what you could do. You can lock doors and gates, automatically trigger network logging. You can, as I mentioned, the fog bomb. And then taking offensive measures. If you're military, if you're law enforcement, you're allowed to take offensive measures. If you're civilian or your security, that is a felony, and jamming, laser, shooting them down with shotguns, the mysterious drones in northeast Colorado, I can't tell you, excuse me, the number of people that said, well, I just shoot it down. I've got my drone hunting license. So there is, believe me, that is a felony. It's just like shooting at a helicopter or a manned aircraft, so be careful with that. So what we do is take a phased approach to the solution. We kind of understand and do some analysis of what is the threat assessment, and then I'll build from there. So with the threat assessment, we can install kind of a small sensor. It's an RF100 for early warning and detection. It provides basically the RF and the audio acoustics. It'll provide early warning alarms, omnidirectional coverage, and the range is about 1 kilometer. Those are some of the alerts that you might get on the right-hand side there. I'm not going to go through all those, but you can see kind of that's the starting point, number one.
So, one of the things many of you on the call have gone through with us is you've heard how we move from doing vulnerability and threat analysis. Once we identify the vulnerability or threat, we then start to develop the process by which we're going to mitigate or eliminate that. And I think what you're seeing here with what Chuck and his firm are doing is exactly that. We've analyzed that drones have the potential to be a threat or to be used as a deadly weapon. And what he's walking you through now is some of the things that may be available to your insureds to assist in loss mitigation or prevention. And of course, that's really the key to all of this. The great thing about the Beasley Deadly Weapons policy is that it's a before, during, and after policy. So obviously all of us and all of your insureds would much rather prevent something from ever having occurred than to try and deal with the claim after the fact. So sorry to interrupt.
No, perfect. Good segue. And that's exactly what we're doing on this next slide. It's really understand the patterns of the drone activity. How frequently is it happening? When are you seeing them? Are you not seeing them? I mean, that's good to know too. If there aren't drones out there, you don't have a problem. But it's quickly uncovering the airspace activity and basically staying up to date with the critical information. You'll see some of the heat maps there, the alerts by hour, the alerts by date. Obviously, the red line, you probably want to dig into that a little bit and see what's going on. Okay? All right. And then finally, it gives you some automated reporting of the data. So you've got kind of filtering the last 7 days, what do you want to do with it, and make some decisions based upon that. With that decisions, you've got situational awareness. Now I've got the data. I understand what my problem is. What do I do with that? And then that's where the larger sensors start to come in. The full solution starts to come in. It's an RF300 that gives you the situational awareness. It'll localize where the drone activity is, where the operator is. It'll give you passive direction finding, so telemetry of the solution, identifying exactly where they're coming from. Is it north, south, east, west? Where's the operator typically at? And it supplements the smaller sensors, the RF100. And it's basically a sensor that goes on a pole. You can see the picture of it on the right-hand side there. And then this is some examples of the actual screenshots of an area that was being looked at. Not going to spend too much time on that. If you have questions, feel free to reach back out. And then the recorded flight path. Now we've got, this is where they're coming from. This is where our problem is. We can establish security measures and take countermeasures based upon that data from the situational awareness. And that's the final approach to things is what are the countermeasures we can take? How do I mitigate those drone threats? Can I track the drone in real time? I want to find the pilot. I want to inform security staff. What do I want to do? Do I want to lock down and close those blinds that are pictured in the picture there? Maybe there's a board meeting going on up there, and the drone comes and sticks on the side and starts listening to the side of the window to capture board meeting notes. There's ways to take countermeasures based upon that. And it can also record video evidence. Working closely with your security teams, we can capture, I said earlier, the PTZ cameras and other cameras that are in play in alignment there. And then finally, I mentioned if you're law enforcement, if you're military, you can really get offensive, no pun intended, but you can remove and disable the threat. You can confiscate the drone and record the evidence and do legal prosecution. But if you're civilian, don't do that. That is a felony.
Well, and again, many of our insureds are municipalities. They have registered police departments and police forces. So do those departments need to work with FAA, or how do they get the permission to?
Yeah, great question. Initially, it's like anything. You really want to get a sense for the situation. Is this happening regularly? With this solution, you can identify that and give them the data. If it's a one-time occurrence, yes, you're probably not going to want to shoot the drone down immediately and risk the danger of people on the ground and other things.
No, but for example, with their prisons or with their jails, if they've got drones that are dropping things, into their prison yards, that's a fairly scary proposition, I would think, especially for the corrections officers that are working there.
Yeah. Harry, to answer your question, I don't know all the rules and regulations around every single prison that's out there. I'm happy to work with yourself and clients to really dig into it, and let's get some specific situations, because I really don't know all the different. I'm sure they're like, I was at last week, Jefferson County, Littleton Chamber or City Council meeting, and they're trying to enact a new law, and we're trying to prevent some of that. So each one of them has some different regulations and rules that we need to look into. Okay?
Yep.
So That is it. Was there any questions that we had?
I know that we do have a few questions. Susie, you were keeping track of the questions. Do you have some for us?
Yep. So, Chuck, you were just touching on this on a couple slides ago, but one of the questions is, how easy is it to track down who is operating the drones?
With the full solution with the RF300 sensors, very easy. You're going to get the telemetry of where the drone's flying. You're going to get the information of that radio signal going back to the drone. It's very simple.
But obviously that requires us to have the system in place to do it.
Correct.
Thank you. Another question was, this individual is assuming drones are capable of dropping bombs and chemical weapons, but can they be modified further? I think it's getting at, how bad could this get?
Well, I think if you go and watch the YouTube video of that clip that shows the quadcopter with the fully automatic weapon, shows the precision with which that individual, he flies it through a window into, he creates a fake building, obviously, and then flies it through the back window of a car and detonates it inside the car. I think you can fairly quickly realize, this is not fiction, this is not science fiction, this is not something Hollywood was doing, this is an individual who built these things himself. So I think the answer to the question is, technology is evolving at a rate where the exposure is fairly unlimited.
And by the way, that link you're referring to, I think what I'm going to do for all of you who are on the webinar, or if you've attended before, you know that you'll get a thank you email. I'll include the link in the thank you email, and that way you'll have a chance to check out the video that has been referenced a couple of times. I'm going to try to, go ahead, Harry.
Well, what I was going to say is, because I know many of you on the phone are agents and brokers, so having those kind of things available that you can show to your insured so they understand why having drones included as a deadly weapon on their policy is important, especially municipalities, mass gathering locations, festivals, events, concerts, all of those kind of things. I think that they're going to understand that that's something they absolutely want, and they don't want it in a scenario where it's just not mentioned on the policy, it's not excluded, so therefore it may be covered. I think what they want to know is that it is absolutely covered, and again, that's one of the big benefits of the Beasley policy. I think similarly, if you do have very large events like the one I was referring to, the rodeo that's 3 weeks and 2 million members, we do have Chuck and the team available for doing some consultative services, because of course we do a post-underwriting consultation with every insured as part of this policy. So we definitely want to talk to those folks to understand what their drone program is and what it is they're doing to try and keep all of their patrons safe.
And Harry, we have a last couple coverage questions, and I know Joe Gillian from Beasley is on the webinar. We're going to see if we can unmute it, Joe. I think it's showing that you're self-muted, so see if you can chime in at this point, and if we can get connectivity, we're going to give you a couple of questions, Joe.
Well, Susie, go ahead and ask, what are the questions?
So the first question is, how has Beasley modified the policy to pick up drones? The first question. And the second coverage question is, at what point a drone triggers a claim, considering it is usually the brandishing which can trigger a claim?
Well, that's obviously a very interesting question. A drone flying over your facility is not the brandishing of a weapon. A drone flying over your facility and either dropping something or firing a weapon obviously is. So not that we're here to answer coverage questions from crisis risk, but I think just the policy language is fairly specific that there needs to be a deadly weapon. Someone has to use a deadly weapon. They have to have the intent, so they have to either brandish it or use it. So I think that one is easier to answer than the previous one as to how it's included in the policy. I think that's something for the agents and brokers to discuss directly with their underwriter.
Exactly. And it looks like we might have some technical issues getting Joe tapped in, so we'll make sure next time that's set up. And in the meanwhile, we'll forward the questions that were asked related to coverage to Joe, and I'm sure he'll get back to you.
So that we have hit exactly 1 hour, so that's pretty precise. So, so I thank everybody for joining us today. And again, anytime you have questions about this or any other kind of threat or vulnerability that face your insureds, or if there are insureds on the phone, don't hesitate to reach directly out to us, and we're happy to, get Chuck or anyone else involved who are the appropriate experts. So thank you
very much.
Yep, thank you all. And again, those of you who are going to be at RIMS, make sure you come and see us. And also, if you want to participate in the deadly weapons events that we're going to be putting on, let us know, because we'll be sending out invitations. There we go.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Have a good day.